to Truth and Lies Radio, a program dedicated to revealing the truth and exposing the lies about the destruction of your freedom and prosperity and what you can do about it. And now, your host, former Washington right-wing activist, international living, banking and asset protection author and expert, and American patriot in exile, David Finzer.
This is David Finzer, broadcasting for the second hour from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia, on my 5,123rd day of voluntary exile in protest from an ever less free America. To comment during the program, you can send me a Skype text message at Truth and Lies Radio, all crammed together as one word, or you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com. As soon as our new studio is finished, you will also be able to call in toll-free from the U.S. and Canada, or Skype from around the world and join the conversation. Also remember to check out our Facebook and YouTube pages at Truth and Lies Radio Show. According to the U.S. debt clock, the total U.S. national debt is $15,934,776,000,000, with a debt per citizen of $50,735 and a debt per taxpayer, the guy who always has to pay the bill, of $139,688. Of course, this is more than the whole gross domestic product, which means the United States really is bankrupt because it owes more than everything, all the goods and services it produces in a whole year. And again, we're faced with a staggering total U.S. debt, when you put it all together at all levels, of $56,955,095,000,000, or $684,381 per family. I don't think the government is doing a very good job of spending its money, or it wouldn't be that way. Well, today is Threatening Thursday, and that means that the threatening man himself, Oliver Neville, my European co-host, is online and joining us from the UK, and we're going to talk about all things European, and Ollie always has an interesting perspective. Hello, Ollie. How are you today?
Hello.
Hi. I don't normally follow sports very much, but this badminton thing has sort of gotten me a little bit annoyed, because it seems like there is an issue with the way the tournaments are set up, because every sport I know about, there's a strategy involved. And sometimes you don't play your best, or you want to lose a game if the strategy calls for it, to get yourself in a different bracket or whatever. And so I thought the goal was to go for a medal, not to play the hardest game you can every time you're up. I mean, it just seems to me that like it's a tempest in a teapot, and just somebody wrote the rules badly, and so of course they never take responsibility. They want to punish the people who are playing their hearts out.
Absolutely. It seems sometimes you sort of think maybe you should be questioning the people that didn't try and throw the game, because they're not trying to win the medal. I mean, it's not a fault of the individuals. It's a fault of the whole, the tournament setup, as you say. So it's ridiculous to punish people that are just trying to do their best to win. It may be against sportsmanship to play badly, but it's not against the rules themselves. So I think it's a bit ridiculous to punish people for being unsportsmanlike.
Yeah, right. Now, talking about ridiculous, I guess that takes us right into the first story. The Twitter police. A 17-year-old boy was arrested for sending a British teenage diver, Tom Daley, a malicious tweet after the host poster boy missed out on a medal in his opening event at the London Games. Police arrested the youth at a guest house in Weymouth. Did I pronounce that properly?
You did indeed.
Very good. A country town in southwest England, hours after Daley received the messages. The Twitter user allegedly accused the 18-year-old of letting down his late father after He and partner Pete Waiterfield finished fourth in the 10-meter synchronized platform diving event on Monday. Daly retweeted the message from the user Riley69, which said, "You let your dad down. I hope you know that." Unfortunately, Ollie, you're going to have to wait until the break to come back and answer that. But we'll talk about that as soon as we come back. This is David Finzer with Ollie Neville for Truth and Lies Radio. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio. Before the break, we were talking about a 17-year-old boy who was arrested for sending a malicious tweet. Ollie, you found this news story and sent it to me. I'm sure you have something to say about this, being a sort of grand master of Twitter yourself.
I wouldn't say grand master, but I just thought it was absolutely ridiculous that someone could send something that was offensive, just, that something upset someone, and then be arrested for it. I mean, it's perfectly fine for people to say to him, "You shouldn't have said that," or "That's offensive," but to actually come down and arrest someone and, lock them up, and it was all over the front of the news, people saying, that this guy is good, this guy's arrested. You just think, what sort of free society do we live in that you express an opinion, sure it might be a not a nice opinion, but you're then arrested for saying that. And what really worried me was the sort of the public reaction to this whole case, of the amount of people that started trending on Twitter that this person should be banned, that people were celebrating him getting locked up. And you're thinking, as soon as you start persecuting people for opinions you don't like, we go down it's a very slippery slope. There's been lots of cases actually on Twitter recently. Aidan Burley, who's a Conservative MP, he criticised the Olympic ceremony for being left-wing and multicultural. And sure, maybe you disagreed with that opinion, maybe you didn't, but now people calling for a public apology for him representing an opinion. And it seems ridiculous that people are really getting so cracking down on free speech.
Well, it certainly seems like the left tends to be more sensitive about opinions that disagree with it than conservatives and libertarians, in my experience.
Well, absolutely, and there's an example of the sort of the double think almost on Twitter. Guy Adams, who's a journalist, he criticised NBC, who is one of Twitter's partners, and he tweeted a publicly available email address of the CEO, and Twitter shut his account down. And there was a huge outcry by everyone, obviously, about Twitter censoring him, and quite rightly. But when someone has an opinion that doesn't quite fit that mold, it wasn't someone criticising a big corporation, it was someone sending a rude tweet, then suddenly there is no one supporting him, even though it's the same principle. I mean, this guy, the guy who's been arrested now, he allegedly also sent death threats to people, and you look at it and it is just infantile sounding off, saying, "Oh, I'm bigger than you," or you "Don't disrespect me or I might smack you." There is no credible belief that anyone's going to be hurt by this bloke who just seems like a bit of a loser. But why do we arrest people for having opinions that are not conformist? It just seems ridiculous, in my opinion. Absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I think it was William F. Buckley Jr., who's way before your time, who made the paraphrases that "hell hath no fury like a leftist about whom the truth has been told." They really don't like opinions that aren't politically correct, and they get to define political correctness. Now, in fairness, Twitter, being a private company, as far as I know, not a government agency, certainly has a right to close someone's account if they want. Then somebody else will come up with something that's competitive if Twitter, locks down free speech too much. But to arrest somebody strikes me as completely beyond the pale. I mean, what is this? Assault by electronic message?
It just seems there's no basis for arresting people for being offensive. As soon as you start arresting people for having the wrong opinions, you can then, it's a very slow step towards being able to, almost in a 1984 style, crack down on anyone who thinks or says things that you don't like.
Well, that's right, because point in fact, if we got to choose and arrest people who don't agree with our opinions, then I would suggest that 97% of the conservative MPs, 100% of the Lib Dem MPs, and 99% of the Labor MPs, we'd have them all arrested.
Absolutely. You can't, as soon as you start to arbitrarily arrest people or go against them for their opinions, then you go towards some sort of tyrannical regime where anyone apart from the people that just say yes, yes, yes to you completely start just, get locked up. And it's worrying now that Twitter, that branded itself as a great enterprise for free speech, is now starting to come down and it's being used to crack down on people. If everyone who sent offensive messages on Twitter was arrested, I think 95% of Twitter users at one point or another would be arrested. How do you pick and choose one because he's insulted an Olympic athlete or he's insulted a celebrity? People insult people all the time, in real life, online, everywhere. So to just insult one because he's insulted a famous person seems just arbitrary and very scary, really. It's worrying that you think that if you upset the wrong person, then you could be in for it. You have the police knocking on your door.
No, I think I need to translate a little bit, because I translate from English to American, because you've used the word worrying a few times, and I think what that really means in American English is really frigging bad. Is that
absolutely?
Okay.
Absolutely. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Good. I'm trying to bring you out of your natural British reticence to the real you that I got to know the week you spent here. Anyway, so it's just bad, and it'll only get worse. But let's talk about the country where lots of things are bad and lots of things get worse. France. France has become the first country in the European Union to bring in a tax on financial transactions today. It was first proposed by the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, who suggested a 0.1% levy on all share purchases involving France's biggest companies. The country's new leader, François Hollande, has been sharply critical of financial services industry and decided to double the tax to 0.2% while applying it to all publicly traded businesses with a market value of over 1 billion euros. Of course, at the rate the euro is dropping in value, that could mean in another year or two, that could mean a corner market. I'm not sure. But that, in the meantime, means anyone buying shares, including credit default swaps, in 109 companies will have to shell out extra euros to the French Treasury. So what's that going to do?
Well, this really follows on from last week when I talked about the amount of the French exodus from the 75% tax rate and the high regulation regime of François Hollande. He's now brought in a Robin Hood tax, which I think is just a joke of a name. Robin Hood, obviously, who stole from the government to give back to the people that it was basically, grinding into the ground. But this is a very damaging tax, and specifically it's a damaging tax for the country that introduces it. Sweden introduced a financial transaction tax in the 80s, and it found that 60% of the trading volume of the most traded companies instantly just moved to London. Their revenue actually fell because the amount of capital gains tax they lost didn't offset the revenue. The French have suggested that they will receive about 500 million euros a year from this tax, but when Sweden put it in, they overestimated by 40% exactly how much they'd be taking in. So you don't actually know quite how much this tax will raise. Either way, it will be negligible and probably be revenue losing. And not only that, it makes markets more volatile. If you charge people to make a transaction, then they don't make lots of little transactions. They have to always save up to do one big transaction. It's like charging people for using an ATM. You don't take 20 pounds out every now and then. You save up until you have to take out £100. And so you get a much more likelihood of ATMs being emptied, and similarly you get a much more likelihood of the market being hugely volatile as people make big trades, and it swings from one way to the other. So really, this could be a very damaging tax as well as a revenue-losing tax.
Well, now,
really good.
I don't have much, I really don't care very much if France damages its economy. What's more worrying, to use your word, to me, is, correct me if I'm wrong, Ollie, but isn't the EU trying to impose this tax EU-wide, specifically to screw up the UK?
Oh, absolutely. This was the French president, when it was Sarkozy was in charge, he was suggesting a Europe-wide version. The French have gone ahead alone now, but hope to roll it out, and it's now being used by people who don't understand this tax to put pressure on the UK government, saying the French have done it, we should let the Europeans put this on us, and it would affect London massively. I mean, it would be hugely damaging because most trading is done in the City of London. It would disproportionately hurt London. Revenues would drop. I mean, it hurts. This tax hurts pensioners and savers the most, as banks pass on charges. I mean, studies have shown that banks pass on almost all the charges to the individuals, and that means the small, the little guy, the pensioner who's got a pension fund, the savers or the charities. So really, it doesn't even do what the leftists want it to do and hurt the rich. It hurts the little guy, it hurts the poorest, it hurts the most vulnerable. Really, it's only damaging.
Well, unfortunately, that's most government initiatives that claim to help us end up being damaging. When we come back, we'll talk about the Exchequer Secretary, David Gauck, saying that penny any U.S. tax avoidance is morally wrong. This is David Finzer with Ollie Neville for Truth and Lies Radio. We'll be back in 5 minutes.